So, you've seen the headlines, you've definitely heard the names. The long-sealed Jeffrey Epstein files are finally public, and wow, the internet is just buzzing. But with all the noise, all the speculation, it is so easy to get lost. So today, we're going to cut through all of it. We're doing a clear, impartial breakdown of what these documents actually contain. All right, let's get into it. First things first, let's just try to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of this. This isn't just some list of names. We're talking about 3 million pages of documents, and that includes 180,000 images and 2,000 videos. I mean, sifting through all this is a massive job, which is exactly why we're going to focus on the key revelations that have come out so far. And that really brings us to the biggest question here, the whole reason for this explainer. Beyond the clickbait, beyond all the conspiracies, what do these documents really tell us about the powerful people named inside? Who's implicated? How are they connected? And what does the evidence actually say? Okay, before we go a single step further, this is probably the most important point to understand, and this comes directly from the source material, from the Department of Justice. Just because a name shows up in these files, whether it's in an email, a news clipping, whatever, it absolutely does not mean that person is guilty of a crime. We're just here to explain what's in the documents, not to pass judgment. So here's the game plan for today. We'll start by getting a handle on what these files actually are. Then, we're going to look at 3 different groups of people mentioned: the inner circle, the political and power players, and then the wider social network. And we'll wrap it all up by looking at the huge questions that are still hanging in the air. So, what are we really looking at here? Well, this is not some neat, tidy list of clients. It's a massive, kind of chaotic data dump from a bunch of lawsuits. It's got everything: internal notes, news clippings, flight logs, and some deeply personal and often really bizarre emails. So think of it less like an answer key and more like a chaotic puzzle we're trying to piece together. All right, let's jump into our first category. This is where we start to see how this all builds. This group includes people whose connections seem to be the most direct, the most personal, and in a lot of cases, the most disturbing based on what's in the files. Prince Andrew's name, of course, is all over this. The files have photos of him with an unidentified woman, though the context isn't really clear. What's more telling is the correspondence, which talks about meetings with young women and even dinners at Buckingham Palace with, and this is a quote, "lots of privacy." But maybe the weirdest detail is a message where he apparently told Epstein he wanted to be his pet. Just bizarre. And, the royal connection doesn't stop there. The files reveal a really deep and ongoing involvement from his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson. And what's truly startling here is that her close contact with Epstein kept going long after his 2008 conviction for sex offenses. In one of her emails to Epstein, she just writes, "Just marry me." This one little line, it hints at this incredibly strange, almost weirdly comfortable relationship they had, a tone that you see throughout a lot of their emails. She called him a supreme friend. She took her own daughters, the princesses, to visit him. But the most confusing detail, by far, is an email where she congratulates Epstein on the arrival of a baby boy. It's a totally unverified claim, but it's just so bizarre. And if that child were real, they'd be a teenager today. And that weird email about a baby, it connects to a much, much darker theme in these files. This wasn't just some random comment. One victim actually testified that Epstein's whole goal was to create a superior gene pool by having a baby with her. The New York Times had reported on this before, his plan to seed the human race with his own DNA. When you see Ferguson's email in that context, it suddenly becomes way more chilling. Okay, let's pull the lens back a bit and look at the next group, the political and power players. Now here, the connections that are detailed in the files, well, they run the whole spectrum, from these direct, unverified allegations to much more casual social contact. So let's start with 2 of the biggest names. For Donald Trump, his name does pop up in some background materials, but these specific files don't establish any new wrongdoing. Now, for Bill Clinton, the key thing here is what isn't in the documents. The source material actually points out how surprising it is that this release had no new information about him. Bill Gates is a huge focus. The files contain draft emails written by Epstein himself, making some really explosive but unverified claims. One of these drafts alleges that Gates had an affair, got an STD, and then asked Epstein for antibiotics for his then-wife, Melinda. Now, it is so important to remember these are Epstein's unproven drafts. A spokesperson for Gates has called the allegations completely false. A bunch of other powerful people are mentioned too. Elon Musk pops up asking about social events, but he declined invites to the island. Richard Branson is thanked for his hospitality, the Google co-founder Sergey Brin is noted as having visited the island, and the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak stayed in touch and even planned stays at Epstein's home after his 2008 conviction. Okay, let's move on to our final group, what we can kind of call the wider social network. For these folks, the connections come out mostly through their email exchanges and, in a few cases, financial records. It really paints a picture of the whole culture that Epstein built around himself. Right. In this category, one of the most serious cases involves the British politician Lord Mandelson. And as the files show, his connection isn't just social. It raises some pretty big questions about money, influence, and even sharing sensitive information. Yeah, this connection has a lot of layers. First, financial records show a $75,000 payment from Epstein. There's also a photo of him in his underwear at Epstein's apartment in Paris. But most importantly, he is now reportedly under police investigation for sharing sensitive government info with Epstein, and he has since resigned from the House of Lords. This quote from an email sent by the tech billionaire Peter Thiel, it just perfectly captures the whole vibe of Epstein's world. The biggest problem of becoming friends with you. The life you live is so outrageous, yet I can't tell a soul. I mean, that just speaks volumes about a culture of secrecy, of excess, and this shared understanding that whatever was going on was just not normal. And the files are just full of these bizarre, sometimes flirty, often just crude exchanges that reveal so much. The entertainment exec Casey Wasserman got massage offers from Ghislaine Maxwell. The film producer Steve Tisch asked if a woman was a pro or civilian. Even the Crown Princess of Norway asked Epstein if it was okay to use wallpaper of two naked women carrying a surfboard for her son's room. It's just such a strange, strange world. So after going through all these names and all these disturbing details, we're not really left with clarity. We're left with even bigger questions. These documents, they reveal a whole network, sure, but they don't really explain the man at the very center of it all. I mean, the most basic question is still a complete mystery. How did this guy get so incredibly rich? His rise to fame and fortune, the source of all that money, it's still not really understood at all. And what was his end game here? Was he just a master manipulator, climbing social ladders by connecting one powerful person to another? Was he a blackmailer, using the cameras that were supposedly in every room of his homes to collect dirt on people? Or was he something else entirely, like a spy? We don't know. And really, that's the final takeaway. After 3 million pages, after countless headlines, and years of investigation, the most honest conclusion we can come to, as the source material itself puts it, is that things just do not add up. The full story of Jeffrey Epstein, it's still one of the darkest and most baffling mysteries of our time.